You know what? Earlier, someone brought up those so-called hellholes, cities that people claim have spiraled into chaos. That idea stuck with me because it points to a larger pattern in which the political left has, quite deftly, built a self-sustaining system that feeds on the revenue squeezed from the hands of ordinary Americans who work hard for their families. By capturing the cultural high ground, this new left has crafted a vocabulary that makes resistance feel futile. Terms such as sustainability, sex workers, and compassionate care have become the everyday language through which policy is discussed and framed. Yet behind each label lies a broader set of consequences. Consequences that some people don't want to acknowledge, or at least not to address in plain terms. What we see, regardless of what you call these activities, is a troubling tendency. When these labels are accepted without scrutiny, cities can seem to transform into settings that resemble a modern Dante's hell, leaving behind fragments of humanity rather than the people who once gave life to those places. We witness men and women who appear as hollow shells, persons who once carried purpose and hope now reduced to mere silhouettes, drifting in search of a renewed sense of meaning. It is with a careful, sober eye that I point to Los Angeles as a concrete illustration. This city contributes nearly $20 billion in taxes, and that amount places it ahead of every state in the union except for four. In other words, if a given ideology is to be championed on the basis of fiscal virtue or need, Los Angeles would seem to have a particularly strong interest, for it contributes more money than all but a handful of states, especially when contrasted with many red states. There is another data point that often slips into the background of these debates. I have another example to consider. Blue states, it turns out, are frequently the ones providing support to red states, sometimes propping them up financially in ways that keep the larger system functioning. Massachusetts, for instance, sends more funding to the federal government than any other state. This shows blue states are not merely recipients of federal largesse. They play a decisive role in financing the national framework, sometimes at odds with the political currents of the more conservative states. Meanwhile, there are red states that do not contribute as much and yet seem to draw on resources disproportionately. The whole picture grows even more complex when you hear that California is described as a donor state, a place that contributes more to the federal treasury than it receives back in federal spending. And you can juxtapose that with states down south like Louisiana, which face genuine financial strain. The contrast is striking. A region perceived as reliably conservative is simultaneously dependent on the fiscal steadiness of a donor state, while a donor state itself sees constraints in places that indeed rely on it. All of this invites a careful reflection on how much weight we should give to ideological aims when fiscal reality speaks a somewhat different language. With these reflections in mind, I want to shift to a practical demonstration, one that invites examination rather than mere assertion. Let us consider a short exercise, a game I will call radical or restorative. The premise is simple. We evaluate a series of organizations or programs that operate with public funding or charitable support. The question is not whether they are good or bad in the abstract, but rather how their work aligns with broader aims of protection, aid, and social healing. The first item in this exercise concerns a nonprofit that provides shelter and legal assistance to survivors of human trafficking. In this context, the group would be described as restorative. The second item is a Department of Justice-funded program that mentors at-risk youth to prevent gang violence. That, too, is restorative. The third item involves a grant-funded organization that helps women fleeing domestic abuse by offering housing and trauma support. Again, restorative. The fourth item covers a U.S. Agency for International Development program dedicated to shutting down scam operations that traffic people in Southeast Asia. Restorative as well. The fifth item is a faith-based nonprofit that assists migrant children in reuniting safely with their families. Restorative. The sixth item concerns a community group receiving Department of Justice funds aimed at reducing gun violence in cities. Restorative. And the final item describes a global initiative that seeks to prevent trafficking and to keep people from being forced into labor or sold into exploitation. This, too, is restorative. In presenting these instances, the point remains clear. The evaluation in this game is designed to highlight efforts that promote safety, healing, and restoration, rather than schemes that perpetuate harm under the guise of noble language. Taken together, the examples illustrate a spectrum where public concern for justice, shelter, and support intersects with the policies and funding mechanisms that shape urban life. The overarching aim is to understand how words meet reality in the civic arena, and how the choices we make about funding and governance echo in the daily lives of people who seek safety, opportunity, and a chance to rebuild. Restorative. Thank you very much, Mr. Ambassador. We are shocked by how some of these programs, crucial initiatives designed to assist ordinary people in their daily lives, are, as it happens, the very ones that President Trump and my Republican colleagues are intent on shutting down if we pause long enough to consider who is actually carrying out the work that serves the public good. And having just touched upon the troubling matter of sex trafficking, I remain earnest in my inquiry and would welcome any contribution you might care to make about the Epstein files that are persistently refused release. Ma'am, I believe it would be of considerable value to the American public to be able to see the results that evidently lie within that file, whatever its formal name may be, and whatever designation it bears in the official records. There have been many years during which investigators have examined Mr. Epstein and those who moved in his orbit, seeking answers and accountability. He went to jail once, and the course of events suggested that he might have faced imprisonment again had fate not intervened, and his compatriot is presently in prison, continuing to serve a sentence. Those facts deserve to be known, and they deserve to be presented with clarity and thoroughness so that the public can understand the scope of the investigations and their implications. Thank you very much for your time. I yield the floor.